So this session was originally intended to be 12 presentations of groups of individuals that operate pit-tag throughout the basin. And then at some point in time, we had this epiphany that, we got really scared that we would have 12 great presentations, but the goals of the workshop may not quite be met. So Jay and I developed a set of questions, and we sent out to those individuals, some specific and some more general. Some of them, admittedly, were not well written. But the intent of those questions was then to capture and be able to synthesize everybody's experience with pit-tag arrays. And I think we accomplished that goal pretty well, and we'll share those results with you. Now, I did promise those individuals that I'd send the presentation back out to them so they can look at those questions and call me out if something went wrong. We got a couple of minor little issues, but anyway, hopefully it represents. The goal of this really is to share experiences and how people have been doing O&M on pit-tag arrays the last 10 years, essentially. And again, it is our first workshop. We want to try to get at some of these best management practices so we can do our jobs more efficient, easier, better data, and learn more things. So what we're going to start off today is I'll be presenting kind of the results of that questionnaire with a little bit of interpretation. And then Jay will be leading a discussion. And during my piece, we do hope and expect people to make comments, call things out. Any observations that are relevant would be helpful. But we will also be having a separate session at the end where we'll be discussing kind of and trying to glean from this data maybe one step closer to some best management practices. And these are kind of the things that we'll be talking about. The questions address everything from site selection, configuration, antennas, installation techniques. You know, we went down the whole list to try to capture everybody's experience and what they've been doing. Admittedly, some questions were really nice, other questions I had to do a little bit of interpretation on for these purposes. And I want to really thank these following individuals. They took the time to answer all these questions and represent, I think, by far, the vast majority of folks doing pit-tag on them. I'm sure there's probably folks that we missed. That was not intentional. This was a list generated from the planning group, so blame them.
Are you on the planning group?
Yeah. All right, so here's my disclaimer. So it wasn't until I was getting the responses back that I realized I should have asked a different question. And none of the respondents really knew what I meant, so that can't be my fault. That's the response. So I had to do a little bit of interpretation and pulling of answers so that I think I tried to capture the intent of everybody's answer. It may not be the exact word, but I've tried to categorize things so we can try to understand better how folks are thinking. And again, please ask questions as we go. So, as a disclaimer, I guess I'm clear now for all future mistakes. So I'm just going to go by these. I think there's a list of 32 questions. A lot of them dealt with installation and operation, and some dealt with maintenance. It was those latter questions that were a little bit more trickier to capture. But I'm going to go through each of these questions so you can more or less see the responses. They are What's my presentation? I have one right here if I need to pull it out. Beasley. Beasley. I'm going to say the reference to around here. What about mine or computer?
Check the next slide. Yeah, I'll like that or you.
Well, maybe it's just that one. We'll see. Maybe my life. All right. So one of the questions: why were you? Why did you install a pit tag array? And the unanimous answer. And I put up three main reasons you put a pit tag array. And the unanimous response, at least was one of them, was monitoring VSP parameters. And then there's also looking at other research questions, look at overshoot, habitat effectiveness, and I don't have these things memorized, so I can't recall what else was there. And can I pull up my notes on this? Oh yeah, there it is.
VSP parameters, other research questions,
yeah,
cost-effective methodology,
oh yeah,
and in-season monitoring.
Yeah, that was another common response, was that folks thought that using pit tag arrays was going to be far more cost-effective than traditional methods. And that's either going to be doing stream surveys or market capture studies or whatever those other traditional methods are. And we got to note, so it's already been talked about earlier, that a lot of these pit tag arrays came about through different processes. There was the IPTDS project that really addressed three or four different watersheds and was a major effort. Right on the backs of that was the Fast Track project, which were at least folks at the Yakima Nation and DFW really started their adult escapement process. And then there was the momentum, and we had opportunistic funding, and then there were some site-specific reasons for individual pit tag arrays, like habitat effectiveness, and there could be a vast majority of others, but the point is that there's a lot of different ways these things came about and reasons they came about. And some of them, for example, there were some arrays that were used for one reason, and they were done answering the research question, and we inherited, for example, we inherited a bunch of arrays. So anyway, you got to take that into context with all these questions and the responses, that there's a lot of different ways of skinning this cat, and the reasons are just as variable. So the next question was, why did you select the site within that stream? So what was the specific characteristics that you're looking at, or reasons why you selected that site? And so the good news is, again, these are a little bit different. Biological, three main questions. The number one response was biological reasoning. This was a good spot to put this site because we had enough information to suggest that, there was no spawning downstream of this location or at the mouth of the river, and you wanted to capture everybody going into the river. There was good biological justification for putting the site. Then people went, well, then it was really channel morphology. Thank you. Folks were picking out sites that had hopefully low energy, the right substrate size, and then thirdly, access. Could they access the site? Those are the three main reasons why individual sites were selected, which I think make pretty good sense. There was also some responses about trying to minimize noise, electromagnetic interference, and then trying to get good power. Or there was one response about just installation costs. It was a way of minimizing installation costs. But by far, as we would hope, biology, channel morphology, and access were the three drivers on that question. The third one was trying to figure out what people were thinking when they started to determine what kind of antenna configuration they were using. And so by antenna configuration, I mean the number of antennas and the number of rows of antennas. And the number one response was really stream width, followed by study design, which was very interesting. So depending on the width of the stream, that kind of drove how many antennas you put in, kind of drove how many rows of antennas you put in. Followed by the study design. And again, that's more of a general question that I had to lump a few responses in, but that's talking about networks of antennas and how they fit all together. Also, detection efficiency, trying to maximize oxygen deficiency was another good response. Whether or not people wanted directionality. So if you wanted really good results, really good indications on which way the fish were moving, that might require 2, 3, or more rows of antennas. And then finally, funding. A lot of folks just had just enough funding to put in the amount of antennas they got. But by far, stream width was the driver. So when we started looking across our responses, so we had each respondent list their sites with the number of rows and the number of antennas in each row. And so the most common one was a 6 antenna per site, which kind of jams up with, lines up with a month. When we started doing this, there was just a month, and you can only put 6 in, so that made pretty good sense. But really, when you look at the number of rows, so this is just a frequency of the number of rows and then the number of antennas. And so one antenna is actually the most common per row, but the number of rows, the most common is 2. And we have some, these people are crazy out here. So we had to put up here, Lower Selway, the winner, for 19, followed by the Locksaw with 18, and honorable mention to the Yakima Sunnyside with 16. That's a lot of fight control. But by far, I think what we're going to see is, as we start moving from a dominant MUX system to a more NTS and other systems driven, this will change. But this kind of reflects the past, maybe not the future. I also asked the respondents, okay, who's out there building these things? And what we found is that most people, actually what we saw was that groups that are maintaining more than 6 sites essentially have developed some kind of internal capabilities of building their own antennas, cables, pods, and fiberglass reinforced plastic antennas. So there's a lot of expertise being driven locally to support each of these groups' projects. And then we started going into anchor types and installation. And these are, for those that don't know, these are just the models of different anchor types. And there was a couple of dominant, the Manta Ray 88 and the Manta Ray 4 is the dominant. And these are all of various duct builds. We were just trying to see what people are using and why. Most folks are using pneumatic, basically a huge gas-operated jackhammer to pound these anchors in substrate. There's some hydraulic ones, and then there's a couple of gas. And I'm sorry to say, there's still a few people out there pounding them in with a sledgehammer. And so we need to get them. You should not have that. But anyway, so yeah, and again, so we haven't really, one of the things that we would like to understand is this okay? Are these the best, or are these the best? We haven't got there yet. First, we wanted to understand where we're at. And there's a few primaries and there's not too much difference. Maybe people can help me. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between what these things really do. I know there's differences in how you attach. Some are driven with a wire rope. Some you put in all thread. There's some minor differences there. But now at least we kind of got a sense of what people are using. And that was really one of the main things, is trying to capture what's really out there in the stream today. The second question was, okay, how are you making these anchor to antenna connections? This one got a little crazy. I had to come up with some ways of trying to communicate this. But a common approach, and I didn't ask how each antenna in your site is attached. I said, in general, how do you make this connection? And the earth anchor to all thread to an eye or metal buckle to 1 or 2 ratchet straps to the antenna is the common theme, with small variations I think are driven by the anchor type. people sometimes use one cam strap or ratchet strap. And then there was a earth anchor to all thread to the antenna support strut, which is a new one that I've not seen. And then there was a probably for more smaller site earth anchor cam strap antenna. So I think a lot of this is driven by probably the site characteristics and the kind of anchor that you're using. If you have these small little teeny streams, you probably don't need to get all elaborate. But for the big rivers, folks are jamming all thread, 3 to 4 feet down. And again, so we haven't really figured out which one's the best. Hopefully that'll be the near future. But this is kind of a snapshot of the ways that we're attaching anchors to the antenna. And we haven't really identified where the weakest point in this kind of situation is. Anybody have any thoughts? Is it the straps? Is it the anchors? Or if you lose it, it doesn't matter because the whole river's been scoured out? All right. Okay, you guys just gonna listen to me talk all the time. But anyway, I mean, that's what we're, if you guys can shed any more light on what I'm presenting here, it'd be great. And maybe we'll save that for the discussion. But trying to figure out if this is the weak spot, this connection, where is it? I don't think we really see a whole lot of anchors getting pulled out of the ground. So I don't think it's the anchors. They're going pretty hard. So it's somewhere else. Anyway. The next one, switching gears, gotta have permits for all these things. So we made a whole big list of all these permits. And there's a lot of them. And I think it probably depends on jurisdiction, state, and the agency. Some folks admittedly get a lot of permits. Other folks don't get very many. I didn't really put up average number of permits required or obtained, not required, but obtained. Some folks don't get many permits, but there's a lot of folks who get a lot of permits. And certainly land access was a big one because you got to get to the land. 404s, cultural, ESA, NEPA, wild and scenic, state and county, all pretty legitimate permits. Sometimes, I want to say 5 or 6 is kind of an average number of permits, which takes a lot. In some instances, like we have a Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, we got a statewide hydraulic permit for all of our antenna arrays. So one permit covers everything we want to put in the ground. Ways you can kind of be more efficient. But sometimes for county permits, they're very site specific. Depends on what stream you're putting in. Sound good? So then we asked, okay, if you're going to install these things, can you dig a channel in the substrate? And really the response was, you can't quite see it here, yes, no, or maybe we never asked. And most folks reply that, yeah, they can dig a channel in the stream to bury these antennas flush with the substrate. But there's the next other response was, I don't know, we never really asked if we can dig a channel in our stream. So there's still some uncertainty associated with it, for sure.
Allowed to dig a channel or able to dig a channel?
Allowed to dig a channel. Able to pull it. Or I should say, if you want to dig a channel. I don't know if people want to, but maybe they should. We don't know yet. So from antenna installation, the idea was, and again, there's 3 responses, not quite shown on this thing, was, did you install your antennas right on top of the substrate with maybe a little bit of moving rocks around? Or did you put them on top with a lot of moving of rocks around so they're really well seated? Or did you put them flush? Did you actually go in through, dig a channel, make your antenna sit down below, flush with the substrate? Those are the 3 responses. And it turns out it's about even all the way around with, this is the flush on top with a lot of hand movement. So what I mean by that is you're wanting to put your antenna right here. There's a whole bunch of rocks in your way that's not really well seating the antenna, so you kind of move those rocks out by hand. Sometimes there's a lot of rocks and you want to get a really good job depending on the site. So you do a lot of hand movement. versus actually going through and doing a 4 or 5 inch trench, the width of the antenna, all the way across the string. If folks were digging them flush, the vast majority were doing it by hand. Whew. And I've seen some of them dug by hand, and they're really big streams. That's a lot of rock. And there was one response was using machine. And I don't know what kind of machine that was. And then we asked, did you do the cable installation the same way? One thing that was not asked was, do you use anchors to install your cable? I think everybody uses anchors to help install their cables. Does anybody not use anchors to help keep their cables down? Raise your hand. All right. That was just one thing that I remembered that I should have asked. But anyway, so again, similarly, folks had a kind of a similar response to the cable situation. A lot of them were flush, but a little bit or a lot of it movement of cables to try to get those protected as much as possible. And then for those folks that were installing APN pods, how did you do those? And the vast majority were flush. So you're digging a hole, you're sitting your APN pod down flush with the substrate, and you're covering it back up. With other ones were on top a little bit. I think one response was they attached the pod to the antenna. Other ones, they responded as a lot of substrate to keep them well seated. So we don't really have any, there isn't a, that's one of these things that we got to figure out what's the best practice. And that might require, that we'll talk about later, is collecting a little bit more detailed data on exact installation approaches and longevity to really understand where the weakest link is in maintaining site operations. So then we said, okay, given the basic 2x3 antenna site, what's the average number of hours it takes your group to install? And it really came into about, 4 people, 3 days, or 3 people, 4 days, whatever you want to do. 95 hours to do a site. The variation was great. Of course, I'm sure that's dependent on site-specific requirements, whether or not you have remote sites with a lot of big rocks, or you can drive up your compressor and just pound them right in, or you got to go through several different rods because they're all stuck in the substrate and you can't get them back out. That's happened to a few people, right? So anyways, but the average and median were very close, and I think everybody's kind of doing the same thing. So then we started asking a little bit more about sites and the average number of sites these different groups were doing, and whether or not they were registered as antagonists or not. And we had, there was on average everybody's 21 and 12. We had some folks that were just having a couple sites they were just working on, and folks with a large group of sites, I think spread out over the Columbia Basin. That's probably I'm sure that's site group. And then whether or not they're registered or not. And there's a bunch not registered. But we expect them to be registered probably by the end of the week. What I didn't ask is, do you have any additional sites planned for the near future? Which would have been nice. So maybe that's something we can follow up with. Because I don't know, is 213 in? Or is it 313? I don't know. I might have a lot of dots, but maybe not enough dots. And then we started talking about, are your sites intended to be full-time operational? And I thought everybody was going to answer yes, but there was quite a few folks that answered no. And again, these are the number of respondents. This does not reflect the number of antennas or the number of sites that are operating. I didn't go through and ask people to tell me which site was full-time versus operational. We were just interested in people's intent. And the follow-up question was, okay, if it's not going 24/7, why not? well, when you look at the responses, it makes pretty good sense. Canals and hatcheries are only operating part-time of the year. Steelhead spawning areas are only happen in the spring, last time I checked. If your stream doesn't have water in it, probably don't need to operate the pit tag array. And one response was, we pull ours out right before high flow hits so they don't get damaged. But these first three were clearly indication of, 3 to 9 month operation. I don't know. And if those are permanent, ongoing sites, then maybe there's an opportunity to designate them differently in their name, so that people know right up front, oh yeah, this is one of those seasonal sites or temporary sites. I don't know, so they don't get any confusion when they start, abusing the data. I mean, using the data. But yeah, so there's a lot of canals and hatcheries are wired up, which is great. Then we had steelhead spawning areas, followed by seasonal flow, and these high water sites. So that's, while this was surprising, it kind of made sense when we followed up. Then we started talking about, okay, how often do you download this data? And for the most part, a lot of these sites are downloaded daily, assuming these are probably all sites with modems. But then we got every other day, then we got weekly, monthly, quarterly. So there's a range of responses, most likely associated with whether or not you have a modem and where that site is located. I know there's some sites they got to fly into some sites, or raft into, or hike into, or all sorts of crazy stuff. So all of that's reflected. But again, maybe you could get, I think daily is probably a nice thing to have for data quality. How does that happen? Cost benefit on establishing a new VPA satellite that gives these data. We also asked about other types of metadata. So are you collecting, besides the interrogation data, are you collecting the diagnostic data on your site, power and noise, or are you collecting any of these environmental data? Most folks are collecting some extra data. The diagnostic data by far is the most common. 9 out of 11 responded. And then followed by this environmental data. Again, I think we're still going to be talking about what these data are going to be used for and how it all fits into the big picture. But we kind of wanted to get a sense where we're at with these types of metadata. So I think that's good. Now we're going into, so this is still operation. How often do you just go out and physically look at your site? For the most part, people are going out once a month just to take a look at the site. They don't need any maintenance. It's just doing a monthly check, making sure everything looks good, making sure you don't have a rodent eating through your cables or a tree going to fall on it or whatever the case is, a bunch of junk on your solar panel. There's all sorts of good reasons to go out and have eyes on your site. But it ranged from never to annually. But, and I think that's probably based on their experience of their site. Some sites have no noise, are running really clean, and we have a few sites that we haven't done a single thing since 2009. Other sites, we do things, all the time. But, so this is, you have to take into account the diversity of sites and where they're located, and, certainly some sites, a daily visit, hopefully that's right outside your office, center, and take a break. But in general, a monthly site visit seems to be the norm right now. And this kind of gets at it. So how many sites with modems? We got 50 sites right now with no modems. And believe me, modems are helpful. And again, this probably gets back to how these sites were installed and funded, or maybe where they're geographically located. But modems certainly do help you not only improve data quality, but help you diagnose your system. We got a few these are a few direct lines, so they actually got a hardwire, but most of the sites sellers have modems. And there's a diversity of modems. Most of them will probably be obsolete in the next couple of months because we're going to 4G. And I think there's only a few 4G modems out there right now. And I don't know what the situation is with the SAT modems, but we've gone through a few different types of modems. There's Qualcomm Hughes and the Globalstar are the three basic SAT modems that's being used. But the current modems is, I guess it's not a really exhaustive list, but it's either CloudGate, Verizon, and then there's a few other ones that I've never heard of before. So there's not a whole variety of modems, and I don't know if that really matters or doesn't matter. So that's not my area of expertise. Hopefully somebody can figure that out.
Andrew, and just clarify that that's by users, not the numbers of modems that are out in the field. It's just
by user responses, yeah. And so I try to capture all the different makes and models they use. But this is really, you got 143 modems out there, and 50 sites without them. So if you're going to do your bulk purchase of 4G modems, let's go ahead and give out 250.
Did you ask why the sites that didn't have modems chose not to, or were not using modems?
No idea. I'm assuming it's funding. But if there's another good reason, speak up.
funding and find access to the office cheaper than the
Yeah. Anything else? Is there any other reason why?
Remote locations with no cell coverage.
Geographic location.
So yeah. Geographic, you mentioned.
Cell or SAT modem? SAT modem?
Well, expense would kick in that case.
Yeah.
So
SAT modems are expensive.
Yeah.
Long term, you have VGA satellites.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Power source. So then how are all these things run? Surprisingly, most of them are off grid power, which I guess is fantastic. It's cheap and it's relatively reliable. But we also started a lot of solar and a lot of thermoelectric generators. And then I'd love to hear about some of these hybrid things. I've not seen one. Somebody's still running some batteries, but we got hybrid wind solar and a hybrid TIG, which is that the same thing? What's the hybrid TIG?
Hybrid TIG is just TIG with solar panels.
Automatic.
Okay, and then we got this wind solar. That has to be something board related thing. But yeah, lots of propane, lots of solar. Solar is good in some parts of the basin, not good in other parts of the basin. But yeah, a lot of good grid power. And I think we'll follow up on that. This was one of the power source was one of the major issues with maintenance, with power failures. So if it wasn't grid, then it had to be these other ones. Maybe it was. All right, so then we're asking, like, okay, what kind of antennas, the composition of antennas that you have in the stream today? And we still got this legacy of BBC Schedule 80 in there. But we had this big, some of these things I've never heard of before. But there's this insurgence of the HDPE coming online. But we have things where these PEX hose antennas, which are the flexible ones that I think you were talking about, Chris. The fiberglass reinforced plastic antennas, which I'll admit I don't fully understand what that is. Is that like the Biomark Stout antenna, or is that the new fabrication approach that I'm unaware of? Some ABS, and then there's some floating antennas out there. So we have a wide range of materials, but I think what we'll see, this is today, right? In a couple of years, we'll start seeing this HTP go up. I don't think is anybody really putting BBC-80 back in the stream, or is everybody still trying to convert when needed over to HTP? I think that's what most folks are doing, right? Converting to HTP when your Schedule 80 goes out. I don't really have any experience with any of these other ones. I'd love to hear more about it. And we will hear about some of them later. And then readers by model. There's still a bunch of mucks out there turning around. Go muck. Some of them keep on going. They won't die. Thank God. We still got a lot of them. Still the dominant reader out there, followed by the new MTSs and a range of others. But I think as one of the limitations of 6 antennas, once you start getting MTS, then you start getting crazy and putting 19 antennas. I would definitely check that out. But it also gives you way better data, way more detection, and that's really a limitation. Just a side story. We had one site, they were using 2 muxes, and they would turn off and on, right, Jay? They were turning off and on every what? Gabe? 500 milliseconds. Yeah. And they turned off and on 2 muxes for like 5 or 6 or 7 years. 2 sites. 2 sites like that. So, there you go. They're great. And then you have other ones that just stop working for some reason. But anyway, I'm sure as our reader composition changes through time, that'll be reflected in the antenna configuration. How many doing for time? Are we totally wrong?
Yeah.
Well, we got a little break. Here's our scrapyard schedule 80. Okay. You want to take a break, or do you want me to finish this? I just didn't finish this.
Keep doing it.
All right. So now we're moving into some more, these are the we're trying to get at maintenance. What was going on with maintenance? And so like, okay, what's the average lifespan in months of our following components? And I had this big table of all the components, and basically it's 2 to 10 years. Some folks said forever, but it was really highly available, and of course site dependent. So what I think I should have asked was what the average number of days your site was down and why. So maybe one component failed, but it's just one component. Maybe one antenna failed, maybe 2 antennas failed. But if you got 19, you're still good. But if your whole site's down, then that gets into the data quality issue, and 1 or 2 antennas can just be, depending on the analysis approach, that can just be incorporated into the analysis. But so again, probably should have asked this. I won't ask it now, but think about that. And I think there's actually data out there. Again, this may be things that as we move forward, we may have to start collecting a little bit more precise data to really get down at some of these issues. And I really don't have an idea on that for any of our sites, but it'd be nice to look at that information. It's probably captured in all the logs, but who wants to learn all that stuff? But anyway, some more data that we should be thinking about trying to capture and trying to understand how that, 1, either relates back to O&M, or 2, relates to analysis. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Nicole Tancredo works from the event logs that people put in to try to put together when these outages are on the tag and site. So there's an operational data. But it's one person combing through a lot of event logs each year trying to put this together.
So is that an annual thing that she goes through?
An annual thing that she does. So if you're looking for 2018,
yeah.
Wait until she can get to it.
But that could be something that, we've requested.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the other element of that is if you have a log of that. If the site is only working 60 days a year, you want to know what proportion of the time is down, what proportion of time is down. It's not necessarily a number of it, it's what proportion of the season they're trying to cover that is effective or not effective.
Sure, we can look at it a bunch of different ways. Yeah. Depending on the question, the species you're asking.
When somebody goes to use that data, that's something they need to know.
Yeah. So if it's blown out and the species of interest isn't even present, maybe not a big deal. So if it's right in the middle of the field of spawning, and you're trying to estimate abundance, it might influence. And then so we tried, I don't know, again, I probably should have rephrased this question. Top 5 reasons your site required maintenance. And so the top two number one responses, you can follow them, for power failure and equipment failures. And equipment failure, I think, generally referred to equipment on the ground, not in the water. And so these are the top two number one answers. Antenna damage and cable damage were a quick second. And then I got various answers from anchor failures to vandalism, or a lot of other maintenance required things. But when I tried to prioritize based on all these individual responses, power failure, equipment failure, antenna damage, and cable damage is kind of the order of importance that was happening. Does that sound true to most folks in the room, or did I get that wrong?
None of the equipment failure was more just a glitch in the mux where it stopped functioning, or the data logger stopped functioning.
Yep.
It wasn't broken per se, just needed a power cycle.
Yeah. Okay. So failure, malfunction. Yeah. But I mean, I guess my take-home message on this was the top two reasons for things that are on the ground, not in the water. Right. So that gives us a little bit of hope.
I mean, power failure seems like it's something we should be able to design around. For again, I mean, there shouldn't be a site failing because of power, and more than half the sites are on grid power. So what are we doing wrong? I mean, if we're losing that much data because
Switching the battery.
right? So
Yeah.
there needs to be a maintenance schedule. I know most people swap out their batteries when they fail, but that doesn't make sense. It costs so much to put these sites in and operate them. To have them fail because we didn't go out after 3 years to replace the battery.
Now, what we still don't know is, does all these things really comprise, 5% of the operation, or is it 50% of the operation? So we have to put all those things in context. But the fact that the two number one reasons are because they're not in-stream things, which I think is, we have room for improvement, and we can improve this. We can just have redundant power. We can have grid, solar, NTIG, I can study. Triple redundancy. But anyways, I thought that was, and again, this is one of those things that I wish I would have asked a different question. But I think the take-home message was this kind of order. So I think that's very interesting. And then so, to follow up, for maintenance purposes, how often does your staff go out and have to perform maintenance at these sites? So you're not just going out and looking at it, you actually have to go fix them. On average, it's about every 6 months, with some very rare and some once a month. And again, I think this is all set up. Admittedly, there's some sites that are very, very important, and yet don't have a whole lot of options. So you got your equipment in a really high energy spot, but it's the only spot you got for whatever reason, and it's going to take a lot of work to maintain that site. Other sites are golden, and you go out there once a year, make sure it's good. But on average, folks are going out there to do maintenance about once every 6 months. And I didn't ask how much that is; it was just a general maintenance. But presumably, it's mostly to fix power and equipment. Now we're getting into a little fuzziness. So I said, what was that? So I really wanted to get the opinion of the respondents on what they thought the weakest link for this whole setup, right? We're trying to collect data from rivers, and what's the weakest link in the entire setup of these sites? And I got a range of responses. There wasn't one overarching responses, so I tried to capture all of them. It ranged from offloading to alert systems to, I did get a couple of these regional O&M. Folks were on that. If we had a regional kind of O&M approach, it might be a lot easier to maintain. And I know a lot of folks do have a regional approach already going, but clearly some folks don't. Reliable power supply, that gets back to our previous slide. And yeah, when things break in the middle of the runoff, you can't fix them. That's a tough one. That's one of the ones that we're just going to have to deal with, especially when dealing with steelhead. When antennas get ripped out or come unplugged, you're kind of stuck. I don't really want people going in there during runoff, but you got to wait and then get back in there as soon as you can. What alternatives do we have to cabling? Are there alternatives to cabling? Can we start putting Bluetooth and all these things? The big one, of course, was proper funding for all. So there wasn't really a consensus. There was kind of a more diverse group of answers, from funding to equipment issues to O&M. And then I blew it on these ones. Average cost to operate these systems, $1,000 to $8,000 per site. 5-year cost to maintain these systems, $5,000 to $50,000. It was all over the board. It was all over the board, and I really knew instantly as soon as I get a response that I should have done something different. And then I asked, do you think you're getting the best bang for your buck from your system? What's the cost data quality ratio? What do you think, how things are doing? And for most people thought this was good to very good cost to data quality ratio compared to traditional methods. And I can tell you from our standpoint, once we started making comparisons, we stopped doing tributary stream field underground surveys. We just got far more accurate, more precise data, along with all the biological data from these fish that we can ever get doing stream surveys, counting steelhead reds. I mean, there's no comparison. Not for steelhead. I don't know about the other ones yet. Yeah. But we also got some good recommendations again about funding, remote communication, getting better read range. Folks thought if they get better read range on other systems, they can get more detection, more information. I think folks are working on that stuff. And then there was this concept, which I think has been talked about already, this economy of scale. Should everybody be going out and trying to do their own thing, and then we meet every 10 years, or are we going to try to get our stuff together and have a coordinated approach and do this thing right? And I think that's where we're going. And by the suite of responses I got, I certainly got a much better warm fuzzy knowing what everybody out there is doing compared to what I knew a couple months ago. So I think we're in pretty good shape, and the stuff that we need to improve on, I think is completely doable. My opinion is biased. Then I said, okay, what didn't I ask? And I got a couple of slides that maybe we can, we won't try to answer these things, but these are good questions for people to think about. I said, what did I miss, or give me some fun facts about your site that, you want to share with the group. And so some folks, how do I get expertise in doing O&M? Which is a great question. If you're out there with a couple of sites and you put them in the ground, and what do you do next? There was some, and then there was another folks, can we get these web-based tutorials and protocols and documentations and maybe answers to these frequently asked questions, kind of like the Tigers is doing for P4 and all their other applications. So kind of more independent support for O&M. And what was the standard? Now, how do I know my antennas are good? Is there a standard read range for all these things? And what do we know about it? How do I build antennas to maximize read range? What are the pros and cons of antenna orientation? We do have a lot of flat plate antennas out there in the system. I think there's a few hybrids, and there's certainly on the small streams, there's some people doing pass-through antennas. But I don't know how many big systems have hybrids. We tried one for a while, and yeah, we're no longer doing that. But in systems, especially I guess maybe in regulated systems, with not a whole lot of large body debris going down, maybe you get a fantastic performance from these everybody knows what a hybrid system is, right? Only anchored on one end, so it floats up and down with the flow. Sounds great. We even tried to install one mid-channel floating. How'd that go, Jay? Yeah. But what are the pros and cons of all this stuff? There's both from a data quality standpoint and then from an operational standpoint. Maybe there's new techniques being made that these pass-through things with all these flexible antennas Maybe now we can start getting good Jubal information. Maybe how big can you put them? I don't know. Oh yeah, what do you do with noise? How do you deal with noise? How do you troubleshoot and how do you minimize your noise so you can maximize your read range? That was another good question. And also, there's a need for this regional O&M team and not these ad hoc systems where folks are trying out there start all by themselves and trying to do it from ground up. We try to help people where we can. Again, more adequate funding will save money due to shorter response time, improve data quality. Again, more O&M. Everybody's thinking O&M, which is great. Remote communication was a big one. People need to have remote communication. There was a big plug for these fiberglass reinforced antennas and B&B modems.
I'll get into it.
Excellent. Excellent. I just put it up there. I'm trying to capture everybody's response. And then we had another comment, text antennas for small streams and juveniles has been working great. So if you have small streams where you can put these, what's called cable antennas, cord antennas, you can essentially wire up the whole stream, the whole water column. And if you got a bunch of juveniles going in there, I think they're getting fantastic read range. So, or detection. So, going to close up this section. We've talked about getting a steering committee established and working on best practices for all these things that we do out in the stream. ISEMP has already been working on some straw man. And again, as we go through that, I pose the question, do we need to get better data on some of these things, or can we just all nod our heads and say that's the way we're going to go, or do we want to go look at the data first? Those are discussions that we need to have. We got to figure out some long-term planning from an O&M standpoint, and then how to figure out at the same time how we deal with these catastrophic losses, which supposedly are going to be coming more and more frequently. But so far, we haven't had a catastrophic, I don't think, have we?
Ordinance called in 96.
Yeah. Or 98. Yeah. So we're due. Okay. So we're due for a catastrophe somewhere.
Yeah.
Funds with an All right. I think now's how about we take a 10-minute break now.